Okay, welcome back, Nick Bendel from Hunter and Scribe. How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing really well, Owen. Great to see you again.
Yes, and good to have you back for our third segment on the weekly news of what's happening in the property market and industry.
The good thing is there is never a shortage of news, so there is always stuff to talk about.
Yes, and even if we've spoken about it once last week, it comes back and serves it up again this week.
It's kind of like fashion. It always comes back sooner or later.
Cool. And Nick, just quickly, Hunter and Scribe, what is it you do there?
Well, Hunter and Scribe is a content writing agency, Owen, and we write content for property and finance professionals like buyers agents, mortgage brokers, accountants, real estate agents, financial advisors, and credit repair agencies.
Fantastic. And I'm Owen Davis. My business is Leafield Real Estate, and we're a national provider of property management services. So let's get into it, Nick. What's happening in the news this week?
Well, I've got a really interesting story to start with. Property investors enjoying strong returns. CoreLogic data from the past 10 years shows why property can be such a good investment. If you add the change in the median property price to the change in the median rent, you can see that investors made gains in 9 of the 10 past years. So in 2013, the combined growth in prices and rents was 9.8%. 2014, it was 8%. 2015, 8.8. 2016, 7.5%. 2017, 6.9. 2018, negative 3.6%. 2019, 6.3. 2020, 6.8%. 2021, 34.1% combined growth in prices and rents. 2022, 4.6% growth, and last year, 16.4% growth. Owen, I'm wondering, when you look at those numbers for the past 10 years, what stands out for you?
Well, there's two big numbers there, 2018 and then 2021. 2018 was the minus 3.6%. Nick, do you remember what happened in 2018 that would have affected that?
I have a rough memory. So if I remember correctly, that was when APRA tightened the screws and banks were reluctant to lend. And also we'd come to the end of a 5-year boom in Sydney and Melbourne predominantly.
Yes, you're correct. But the big thing was the Royal Commission, which is where APRA was getting the screw tightening from. And so we're in the middle of the Royal Commission at the time into the banking industry and all the bad things that they do. And then the banks, mainly the CBA CEO, tried to blame it all on the mortgage brokers. Didn't that bite him on the backside? Yes, so at that point in time, lending policies were as tight as they've ever been, as a result of legal departments running credit departments in banks for the first time in history, not allowing them to do anything that even sniffed like it might be dangerous. That's what was causing that issue at that time. And then in 2021, of course, we were into the second year of COVID, where all of the recommendations from the Royal Commission were squarely thrown out the window. I think the commissioner must have been in the pocket of the CBA CEO. I don't know, but or maybe he owned a lot of CBA shares. But we won't speculate. But yeah, for some reason, all of his recommendations were thrown out the window, and of course, interest rates got dropped, dramatically, suddenly, and probably way too far. So that's where we saw the growth of 34.1% in 2021. So what it shows us is that lending policies, as well as monetary policy, interest rates, makes a huge difference on the property market and the property returns.
That's such an interesting point that I think often gets overlooked because access to finance influences how many buyers there are in the market and how much money they have to spend, and therefore how much competition there is, and therefore that influences what's going to happen with prices.
Absolutely. And if we were to move on from there, it's how do people react to that? And over the long term, I've always said it when I get asked the question from people trying to get into the property market, especially property investors and first home buyers. It's like, when's the best time to buy? And it's the best time to buy is when you can get the money from the bank, because policies change, interest rates change, and if you can get the money today, don't wait till tomorrow, because policies can change. I was a mortgage broker for 12 years as well, so I have firsthand experience of seeing these policy changes happen, and you can literally. And it still happens, talking to my mortgage broker friends. But yes, we used to get an email late Friday and saying, "Oh, this policy is going to end as of 5 p.m. today. If there's we'll still accept applications that are lodged before 5 p.m. today, being a Friday, but as of Monday, we'll no longer be accepting applications under this policy." So it can happen that quickly. So if you're talking to a mortgage broker, which you should be, because I think it's over 70% of all new business is written by mortgage brokers for banks now. So if you're talking to a mortgage broker and they tell you, things are looking to change, you have to act quickly. They're not trying to pressure you, or it's because they get these updates and they know what's happening.
With those statistics for the past 10 years, Owen, when I asked you what jumped out, you picked two of the years in particular, 2018, where there was a minus 3.6% performance or change in prices and rents, and then 2021, where it was 34.1% growth. What's interesting about the numbers is they really do jump around from year to year if you look at all 10 years. Property and finance professionals have done a really good job of educating people about the benefits of property investing. But I'm wondering, Owen, should they provide more education around the fact that returns can be volatile and that occasionally there will be years when you get negative returns?
Yes, for sure. It's but if you take out those 2 years, as well as 2023, where it was at 16.4% growth, which was we still had very low interest rates, and it was a bounce back from a big fall in 2022. But I would say in 2022, most of that growth would have been contributed by higher rental yields as well. So but if you look at everything else, every other year, you're averaging between sort of 6 and 9%. That's the range. So it's not a huge range. So it is fairly steady. But again, this is median property prices, median rents, and across the country, I presume as well. So it comes down to individual properties. You can't be guaranteed to get these average returns from every single property.
Yes, I think that's a very good point. The choice of individual location matters a lot, and then the specific property you're buying within that location matters a lot. And then I guess it depends what's happening in the property market, what's happening in the economy, what's happening in the global economy. There are a range of factors. I guess it's important for people to go into it with their eyes wide open to realize that even though, and I don't know what the precise number is, but if we say that on an average year, the combination of prices and rents will be 10% growth, well, that's just an average. It doesn't mean you're going to get 10% every single year. There are years like in 2021 where it's going to be 34.1%. There are going to be years like 2018 where it's minus 3.6%. There are going to be years where it's a bit above and beyond, a bit above and below that number. It's just an average. It can be volatile.
Yes, and so I guess the word of caution is that it is possible to lose money in property. It's especially if you're trying to make short-term gains. It's property should always be a buy and hold. It's not timing the market; it's the time in the market to try and come up with all of the sayings about investing in property. So it's but it's true with you'd have to be have pretty bad luck to invest in a property and not get a positive return within 10 years. And now it is possible. I've certainly seen it happen. But if you go to the 15 or 15-year mark, it's damn near impossible to have a negative return. But yes, it is possible to lose money within 10 years. I was actually speaking to someone on the weekend who'd bought a unit off the plan about 10 years ago in Perth. And yes, it still wasn't worth what he'd paid for it. So now the Perth property market is booming, and so hopefully he'll be in positive territory soon.
Well, so moving on, there's another topic I want to raise with you. Now, funnily enough, last week we were talking about the stage 3 tax cuts, and little did we know that a day or two after that, they were suddenly going to be in the news again. So the news I want to share with you now, Owen, and all our viewers and listeners, government announces tax backflip. The federal government has made changes to the stage 3 tax cuts. Let me now read out a comparison of the old tax brackets and the new ones. With the old stage 3 tax cuts, there was 0% tax up to $18,200, and that is unchanged with the new tax cuts. Under the old one, from 18,200 to 45,000, the tax rate was 19%. Now, with the new one, it's 16%. With the new one, with the old one, it was 30% for 45 grand to 200 grand. With the new one, it's 30% from 45 grand, not to 200 grand, but to 135 grand. Then it's 37% from 135 to 190,000. And then it's 45% above 190,000. And in the old stage 3 tax cuts, there was a 45% tax bracket, but it was above 200,000, not above 190,000. So the changes mean that anyone earning less than about $150,000 will get a better tax outcome under the new stage 3 tax cuts compared to the old ones, whereas anyone earning more than about $150,000 will get a worse outcome. So Owen, first, and I'm very, very curious to hear your thoughts, do you think the government was right to change the stage 3 tax cuts?
Well, I think the correct answer is I don't think they were wrong to do it. Doesn't mean that doesn't mean they've done the right thing. It's the right thing would have been to keep the word, the my word, my honour, statement of keeping the tax cuts were LAW law, to quote another former Labor Prime Minister and Treasurer. But funnily enough, yes, they can change them, and it was expected, which is why everyone kept on asking and asking and asking. And that's because the far left of the Labor backbench has been pushing for it. Because even though in the first two stages of the tax cuts, the lower incomes got the bulk of the tax cuts, and the higher tax brackets got nothing. So now it's been changed so that yes, everyone gets a tax cut, but the ones on the higher tax brackets get a watered down version of what they'd been promised for a long time while they were getting nothing. So it's so it doesn't mean it's not deserved with all of the to the lower income tax brackets, with cost of living increases and so on. But politically, it's a very dangerous move the Prime Minister has made, and very, very few governments have survived from a broken promise of this magnitude. So there was many other ways, and apparently, even though it's not getting through, and even myself, I'm sort of struggling to recall, but there are billions of dollars worth of cost of living relief measures that have been put in place, but no one's feeling it. And it's not cutting through. And of course, there's an election next year, more than likely. So they want to put themselves into a position where the electorate feels like they're getting a benefit. But the problem is that yes, Mr. Albanese was speaking at the press conference the other day and saying that the average salary is in the country is $73,000. Now that's across the whole country. It's a bit like talking about median property prices across the whole country. But in Sydney especially, but it would be the similar case in Melbourne, and especially Western Sydney, where elections are won and lost. To be able to live in Sydney, you can't survive on $73,000. It's the median the median incomes are well above the $150,000 mark, and that's just to survive, to be able to have a mortgage or pay the rent. And then the second income in the household needs to be able to put food on the table and put kids in daycare, and this is where he's playing in dangerous territory to be able to, in terms of winning or losing the next election, because these people on $150,000 or more are struggling as well in Sydney and Melbourne, and because of the higher property prices and the higher repayments. So this is the problem, and this is what he's not seeing. And so he should have stuck to what he promised to keep. And if more needed to be done, then it should have been added on top. So
okay. So then I want to throw my view at you,
yes,
and I'm
please.
very, very curious to hear your thought. So my view is that no one should get tax cuts. They should actually scrap the stage 3 tax cuts. So instead, I think the priority should be returning the budget to a structural surplus. And I understand that we had a surplus last financial year, but that was a temporary surplus due to abnormally high iron ore prices. So I'm talking about a structural surplus. So I'm wondering, Owen, what do you think of that idea that we shouldn't have any tax cuts at all?
That's dangerous politically for any government, especially when they're already in place. But from the point of view of, I think income tax is a bad tax in general. So it's yes, we absolutely need to bring the budget back into a surplus and back under control. We've got a lot of unnecessary debt that was accumulated during COVID. and so it needs to be paid off again. And so there are other taxes that can be reformed to and changed to be able to bring that back in line. So it's so the answer is yes. I don't disagree with you, but yeah, it's probably more about tax reform. We need to lower the income tax in general across the board. You know, there's other ways of increasing taxes, and that are more beneficial. You know, I think we should be getting rid of stamp duty on purchases of property, and then bringing in a more broad-based land tax to compensate. Which yeah, a lot of people, yeah, the previous New South Wales Liberal government was trying to bring that in, and it got scrapped by Labor because they can't see past their nose. And it's because stamp duty is just a bad tax, and it doesn't incentivize people to move houses. It's a disincentive to sell and buy again. And we need more fluidity in our property market, so that there can be more transaction, so people have more incentive to sell and downsize, or to sell and upsize, as they need to, and as their circumstances change.
I would also, I would also like to see
Yeah.
stamp duty replaced by a land tax, and good on us for solving all of Australia's tax problems in the past 10 minutes.
Tell me about it. Yeah, haven't even started.
So let me run another bit of news by you, Owen. Speaking of
Yes.
costs, residential construction price growth returns to normal. Home building costs rose 2.9% last year, according to CoreLogic. That was the smallest annual increase in home building costs since 2007, and below the pre-COVID decade average of 4%. However, building costs did rise sharply in 2021 and 2022, which is why costs have increased 26.6% since the start of the pandemic. So while price growth appears to have normalized, that moderate price growth is now occurring from a much higher level. Owen, you deal with this sort of thing day in, day out. I'm wondering, have any of your property investor clients been affected by the crazy residential construction market we've experienced over the past 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, absolutely. Many clients who were purchased land in 2020, 2021, and trying to get the properties built, with delays from COVID, getting land registered, getting prices locked in, and then even though prices were locked in, when they came to the point of being ready to build, the builders would have to revise their quote. Otherwise, as we saw, many builders were going broke as a result, because they were sticking to the quotes that they had provided, 6, 12, 18 months prior. And so it's we need to keep our builders in business. Otherwise, we're not going to have a building industry. So it's many clients got caught up with that. Many of them faced increases in building costs, and some of them took them on, some of them didn't. And it's just a matter of having to work through it. It's been a painful process, but that's the reality of the situation with costs, increasing costs.
I'm glad that growth in prices has really slowed, but now that it's become 26.6% more expensive to build a home since the pandemic, that probably means we can expect less home building activity in the foreseeable future. And if we do indeed build fewer homes, what impact is that going to have on our property and rental markets?
Yes, as we've spoken about previously, Nick, it's supply and demand, which is what affects property prices. But things like increases in building costs affects it as well. And if builders and developers can't finish building a property because it's not going to be worth what they're paying for it to build it, that's a big problem as well. So property prices had to keep on rising while building costs were rising. Otherwise, you would have seen a lot of half-finished buildings out there because there was no point them completing them because they wouldn't have been able to recoup their costs. So it's so that's another reason why the property market was still going and went strong in those years of 2021 and 22 and 23, because it was again needing to keep up with the rise in building costs.
Well, it's funny how whenever we have these chats, it always seems to come back to supply and demand.
Yeah, it
And
does.
this goes back to the start of our conversation, where it's kind of like fashion. Everything comes back eventually. And with property and economics in general, it's supply and demand.
Yeah, it's it really is that simple. It's basic economics, and unfortunately, not a lot of people are taught it these days.
Well, on
But
that note,
don't get me on the school bandwagon conversation.
let's save that for another podcast.
Yes.
Really enjoyed today's chat.
All right. Thanks, Nick. See you next week.
Bye.
All right. Bye.